Hello everybody! Today we will be reacting to some articles about the crisis in Las Anod. And guys, sorry for having to and for you guys having to wait so long. I still have not gotten used to starting making videos again. So today we'll be looking at articles on the internet about the Las Anod War, or the crisis in Las Anod. Basically, guys, this started all in December after one politician was killed, and now there's a lot of bloodshed. And how do I put it? There's a lot of bloodshed. And also, as you might hear, it is raining, but ignore the rain. So here we have a news article from this place, the Danish Institute for International Studies, conflict in Las Anod and crisis in Somaliland. The de facto state of Somaliland has earned the reputation of an island of peace, democracy and stability in an otherwise tumultuous Horn of Africa region. That was mostly true up until the start of the Las Anod crisis. Yet this narrative, carefully curated over more than 3 decades, threatens to come crashing down with every shell that lands in the town of Las Anod. I've already told you guys that Las Anod has broken Somaliland's reputation. Oh, I forgot. Here I am, guys. Let us continue talking about this. So the recent conflict in the northern Somali city has been defined by increasingly polarized and irreconcilable narratives about the causes of fighting. The Somaliland administration blames terror groups for instigating the violence. Terror groups. Probably they're talking about Al-Shabaab. Whilst traditional authorities in Las Anod claim they are defending their community from the rising insecurity and fighting for self-determination, legitimated by a widespread desire to reunite with Somalia. You know, guys, I may be a little biased for the Somaliland government here, but what the hell does Las Anod think they're doing when they want to reunite with Somalia? I mean, they voted on Somaliland's constitutional referendum. I think they voted, but that referendum, the constitution clearly states Somaliland wants to be independent, and it won 95% of the vote. But let's continue. Yet, if you want to understand the structural causes that undergird the current conflict, we need to first look at the evolving character of the Somaliland state and the consequences of greater international political and economic investment. An influx of international support in the last 5 years has had destabilizing consequences for the unrecognized state. So they're blaming it on international support. Let's see what case they make for it. It has raised the stakes, intensifying internal competition amongst political elites in the center, while heightening the perceptions of marginalization in the peripheral regions. So, they're saying because of international support Somaliland's been getting, the peripheral regions, they're probably referring to Awdal, where the Dir clan is and Saul and parts of Sanag, where the Dur Bahante and Warsangeli clans are. From this perspective, the asymmetrical violence unfolding in Las Anod is not an exercise of counterterrorism or defense against covertly deployed forces from Somalia, as the government in Hargeisa claims. Well, I do recognize that Somalia has no part in this. It's just the Las and people from Las Anod, and not all people from Las Anod are doing this. But actually, there one. So let us continue with the story. Uh, but by state suppression, at least partially fueled by international support. So they're saying Somaliland is suppressing Las Anod. At the core of this conflict, therefore, is a changing relationship between clan and state. I think we should separate clan and state because it's the 21st century. Clans do not matter. This insight is crucial not only for ending the conflict in Las Anod, but also for reflecting on the kind of political institutions that are currently being created across the Somali territories. The article draws on fieldwork in Somaliland, including in Las Anod in summer 2021, and conversations with residents in Las Anod and across many of Somaliland's regions during the conflict. So the conflict in Las Anod on the evening of 26th of December 2022, Abdi Fattah Abdullahi Abdi Hadrawi, a popular young politician in Somaliland's opposition party, Wadani, Wadani, were the second largest party in Somaliland after the ruling party, Kulmiye, was killed by armed gunmen as he left a mosque in the town of Las Anod. The Las Anod people are saying it was because of, and he was killed by the Somaliland government, which I think is very far from the truth. Spontaneous protests erupted directed mostly at Somaliland officials and forces stationed in the town. As tensions grew, Somaliland forces responded to Las Anod youth throwing stones by firing live ammunition, reportedly killing as many as 20 demonstrators. Now, I see Somaliland did go a bit too far in this, firing live ammunition and killing so many people. Let us continue with battle, but let us continue reading. Then on 3rd of January 2023, the anti-government demonstrations escalated into armed conflict following the police killing of Mohammed Ali Saadle, the bodyguard of an influential local businessman. Also, the police might be a bit at fault. The Somaliland police might be a bit at fault here as well. The Somaliland forces withdrew from Las Anod to defuse the situation. Actually, I think that was the wrong idea, leaving Las Anod. What were they thinking? Whilst a committee composed of town leaders and traditional elders was appointed to deliberate the political future of the region. On the 6th of February, the committee attempted to publicly announce their intention to reject Somaliland and form a federal state under Somalia, to be called the Sol Sanag and Ain Khatuma, or SCC or SSC Khatuma. However, the Somaliland forces, which had taken up positions outside of Las Anod, disrupted the announcement by shelling the town. I mean, I also don't agree with shelling the town. But let us continue. Despite promises of a ceasefire, indiscriminate shelling has continued. Somaliland government this shelling The shelling is a bit too much. It's just gonna turn the people of Las Anod more against you. Damaging key infrastructure including hospitals, electricity, and water supply. Another thing Somaliland should not be doing is the Somaliland government. These are essentials. Well, at least the water and hospitals are essential. So, I don't know what Somaliland government is getting at here. By some estimates, the ongoing conflict has resulted in at least 150 dead, approximately 600 wounded, and 185,000 displaced from the Dulbahante population alone. Although, where are Somaliland's numbers? So data concerning Somaliland's casualties is pending. The fight in Las Anod has drawn widespread international condemnation and raises fears that the conflict might escalate into a regional war. I mean, maybe criticize the Somaliland government for some of the shelling, but it's still their land. It's Somali. It's part of Somaliland. The public killing of Hadrawi was not an isolated incident, but the latest in a string of unresolved assassinations in Las Anod that are linked to decades of simmering tensions. Las Anod is the capital of Sol, a region caught between two colliding state-building projects, Somaliland in the west and Puntland in the east. So Puntland, if you guys don't know, basically is independent, but are basically independent, but still say they're part of Somalia. Somaliland was born out of the Somali national movement. SNM, a predominantly Isaac clan guerrilla resistance that fought in coalition with other rebel movements against the Somali communist dictator. I want to add that there. Under President Mohamed Siad Barre. Siad Barre, if you do not know, had basically destroyed Hargeisa and Bur'a and killed up to tens of thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands of people in Somaliland. And is one of the biggest reasons Somaliland now wants independence from Somalia. In 1988, the indiscriminate bombing of major Isaac inhabited cities of Hargeisa and Bur'a under Siad Barre resulted in the systematic massacre of tens of thousands of civilians. This brutal episode of violence and the notion of a state-sponsored Isaac genocide is the central to the narrative of Somaliland independence, which declared independence in 1991 following the collapse of the Somali state. So is it our fault Somalia is now in a civil war? No. But we have, but we did benefit from it. Over 30 years later, Somalia remains strongly associated with the Isaac clan, while the Isaac mostly inhabit the central regions of Somaliland. Clan should not matter in politics. That's what I want to say. Somaliland claims the territorial border of the former British Somaliland Protectorate. It is critical to our independence because one of the biggest arguments against Somaliland being independent is that we have to keep the European borders that were given to Africa. Well, Somaliland is the borders of Somaliland were created by the British, who had colonized Somaliland. So that curtails that argument. They also say that we should have stayed with Somalia after unifying with them. Well, look at other failed unions. The United Arab Republic, a union of Egypt and Syria. Senegambia, a union of Senegal and Gambia. As you might have thought, both eventually both united and then broke up. Somaliland is not much different. That also includes other clans. This is the basis for Puntland's claim to Sol, which rests on genealogical logic. The region is prominently inhabited by the Dulbahante clan, who are part of the larger Harti clan family that are majority in Puntland, while being suspended between two colliding state-building trajectories can confer advantages to certain Dulbahante elites. It has also led to an enduring perception of political and economic marginalization and insecurity. As the fight between Somaliland forces and clan militias on the outskirts of Las Anod continue, a contested and intensely polarized struggle around the dominant narrative has emerged. Fought largely through social media, this parallel war is drawn in participants from across the world, including diasporas, journalists, academics, and even rival US lobbying firms. This maelstrom of competing discourses tends towards explaining the drivers of the conflict in radically different and largely irreconcilable ways. To make sense of this, we need to understand that the success of Somaliland rests in no small part on the efforts of the influential Hargeisa-centered elite and Somalilanders in the diaspora who have successfully produced and sustained a powerful narrative of statehood, inclusivity, and peace in juxtaposition to, and in part because of, prevailing international understandings of chaos, and violence in Somalia. Somaliland has quite rightly been lauded for its relatively democratic elections and largely successful attempts to keep the peace. For example, Somaliland has celebrated its 30-year anniversary 2 years ago. A steady stream of journalistic and academic pieces heaped praise upon the miracle upon the de facto state, describing it a miracle of the Horn of Africa and a beacon of democracy. Well, clearly, Las Anod does not want that. Clearly, Somaliland's shelling of its own citizens in Las Anod, which I said I do not agree with, fits uneasily with this carefully curated image of peace and stability. That this narrative crisis for Somaliland might now be existential to reflecting in an increasingly strained attempts to explain the conflict to the wider world. The Somaliland administration has consistently sought to frame itself as engaged in a counter-terror operation. Well, with the conflict, Al-Shabaab might see a chance to come to Somaliland because of this crisis, repeatedly calling the protesters terrorists. The protesters were not terrorists, so Musa Bihi should know that. He's just making more or less Anod people and hate him, strongly implying Al-Shabaab was behind the unrest and downplaying the scale of popular support. Then, forces from Somalia and Puntland were alleged to be involved. Recently, a new big man has been evoked. China, we are told, might be fomenting the unrest. Well, I have a lot of things to say about China, and none of them are good. So maybe you don't want to hear that. This discourse has found some purchase within the international media. For example, one wide-shared analysis oscillates between baseless allegations of Chinese involvement and a highly reductionist claim that the current fighting can be explained by Darul Dulbahante power laws in 1991. If you don't know, Siad Barre was Darod. These confused narratives disregard legitimate Dulbahante grievances and obscure the underlying issues around resource sharing and decades of presumed marginalization. To be clear, there is no doubt that some Dulbahante figures are playing on these tensions and inciting violence. There's also real threat that, in the future, al-Shabaab, who has operatives across Somali territories and thrives in contexts of instability, might try to exploit the situation. Yet none of this means that there are not legitimate grievances unsolved that remain unaddressed and often unacknowledged. Nor does it mean that the solution is to shell the city into submission. As what I am saying, do not just shell that city. That will turn more people against you. If we want to actually understand the Dulbahante situation, we could do worse than to look at the last Anod declaration on 6th of February by the 33-member committee and 13 traditional elders appointed to represent the different Dulbahante subclans. The Las Anod Declaration rejected Somaliland's claim to independence and announced the intention to form a federal state under Somalia to be called SSC Khartoum. The document appeals to principles of self-determination and international law and effectively announces Dulbahante's self-government. Thus far, most of the discussion of these demands has focused on this political desire to reunite with Somalia and debate over the right to self-determination in the context of the legal status of Somaliland's breakaway from Somalia in 1991. However, the declaration also highlights two very specific grievances related to the position of Las Anod within the Somaliland state building project: insecurity and economic underdevelopment. So they're saying that Las Anod is insecure and underdeveloped economically. The first concerns a string of unresolved assassinations that has targeted prominent intellectuals, businessmen, and high-ranking officials. By some accounts, the killing of Adrawi was the latest in over 100 killings, which began in 2009 but have increased in recent years. A lot of rumors surround these killings, and it is unclear whether one group or multiple groups are involved. But I do not think Somaliland government has anything to do with this. However, there is a widespread perception within the Dulbahante community that Somaliland administration is either directly behind or implicitly enabling the killings. They argue that Somaliland has a... First off, I disagree with the Dulbahante that Somaliland are directly behind or implicitly enabling the killings. They argue that Somaliland has a large military and police presence in Las Anod, yet there have been no meaningful arrests for the assassinations. Somaliland government, when someone is killed, you investigate it. The second grievance concerns what the declaration calls an economic embargo. What economic embargo? Imposed by Somaliland, designed to restrict the presence of international development agencies in the east and concentrate resources in Somaliland's central, Isaaq inhabited regions. This has led some to argue that the assassinations were part of a strategy to divide the Dulbahante and maintain a perception of insecurity in the east. As I said, I do not agree with this Dulbahante narrative. But Somaliland should have investigated the assassinations. It is important to stress that these are only rumors. Yes, there have been long-standing divisions within the Dulbahante, and a significant number of those assassinated were from the largely pro-Somaliland subclan. Yet whilst the veracity of these claims remain unclear, what ultimately matters for understanding the present crisis is the narrative. Economic underdevelopment and insecurity are inherently interlinked issues that are the key to understanding the current conflict and its resolution. These twin issues have intensified in recent years in tandem with an influx of international and economic and political assistance to Somaliland. As you can see, some people have decided to name their businesses after this independence movement. These three sharp fronts show the idea of a counter administration has been long standing in Las Anod. So increased international engagement. In its 3 decade search for international recognition, Somaliland has long lamented lack of international funding. Indeed, a lack of international investment is central to Somaliland's narrative as a standout example of self-government that succeeded against all odds. Yes, we have rebuilt Somaliland from the ground up. Hargeisa, which was once destroyed by Siad Barre, now now looks very, very beautiful. Trust me, I have gone through walks within Somaliland. Everything is beautiful. So let's continue reading. Academics have also suggested that, contra the conventional wisdom of the World Bank, the absence of international aid at the moment of Somaliland's political formation may paradoxically be a key reason for its success. Interesting theory. Whilst this may have been true for Somaliland's early years, it is no longer the case. Buoyed by promises of peace and stability, international partners including the US, the United Kingdom, the EU and the UAE, and Taiwan have all announced various infrastructure, trade and military cooperation initiatives and increased their diplomatic presence in Hargeisa. From 2018 to 2024, overlapping largely with the term of the current president of Somaliland, Musa Bihi, the United Kingdom, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway pledged 38 million for infrastructure projects in Somaliland. The multi-million-dollar investment by the UAE's DP World is transforming Berbera port into a 1 million container trade hub, and by linking it to Ethiopia via Hargeisa with a 250-kilometer motorway, it is anticipated to reshape the regional economy. The number of nations setting up diplomatic missions within Somaliland has grown, while Somaliland has generated a notable presence in Washington through certain conservative think tanks and lobby groups. The United Kingdom has funded and trained an elite police unit, the Rapid Response Unit, whilst Washington is reportedly also interested in using Berbera Port as a new military base. Finally, in early January 2023, oil was discovered in Somaliland's central Marodi region, the region I live in, further raising expectations of a lucrative new revenue streaming for the fledgling Somaliland state. The multi-million-dollar investment in Somaliland's Berbera ports. This accelerating international engagement has had destabilizing consequences for Somaliland that have come to head under the current administration. Firstly, the recent influx of foreign investment and political engagement has renewed hopes of international recognition for the de facto state. This has raised the stakes and intensified the competition over the state amongst powerful local business actors. In the flagship Berbera port deal, for example, the Somaliland government contentiously overrode the concerns of the local non-state actors. This has political consequences too. Somaliland's democratic elections are often heralded by international partners as standout examples in a wider region defined by authoritarianism. Well, yes, Somalia does not have democratic elections. Djibouti has had the same president for a while now. Eritrea has the same president ever since its founding. And Ethiopia, well, you might have heard of the Tigray War. Yet a political crisis emerged in 2022 over delayed elections, highlighting increasingly fractious internal competition within the Isaac subclans over the state. There were arbitrary detentions of traditional leaders, and in anti-government demonstrations in Hargeisa in August 2022, yes, there were some protests. 5 civilians were killed in clashes with security forces. The British-funded RRU are implicated in these killings, as well as in the shooting of protesters in Las Anod at the end of 2022. Much like in Las Anod, Musa Bihi has branded these protesters in Hargeisa as terrorists too. Well, I may have called them attackers of Somaliland's democracy last time I was talking about the history of Somaliland, but now I've changed my position, and protests are protests, and calling protesters terrorists is not a good thing to do. The net result is that politics has become far more of a zero-sum game. Commentators have been correct to observe that the customary clan law known as Her has been key to the peacemaking process that rendered Somaliland a viable political settlement. Yet one effect of increasing international investment is to undermine the system by further eroding the tradition of consensus behind building that was the foundation of the 1991 Peace Pact. Indeed, it is telling that the Garhachis clan and his Isab subclan, who were formed the basis of Somaliland's two oppositions parties, publicly condemned the violence in Las Anod. Now guys, this has gone on. This is now a 30-minute video. I might do a part 2, reading what's left of this news source. But goodbye for now. So, next time we'll be starting from peripheral discontent. So, goodbye, Swagoman Landers. See you later.